Hello, welcome to my video. I have a new microphone. I hope it sounds better. I want to share a chess game I just played that I think was a game that I had a really good grasp on from the start, and I basically played against my opponent's bad bishop. So I'm going to try to explain it and how my thinking process was when creating his bad piece, like through my pawn structure, some decisions that I made. To kind of play against his bishop that ended up being the deciding factor of the game. So, all right, I start with d4. He plays knight f6. Then I go c4, and he goes e6. Now, if I hop the knight out here, he can play a very good opening and pin the knight. But I do it anyways, just because that's typically how I open with white. Um, and I'm not too scared of this capture because I would prefer to have the bishop pair. The danger is this knight hopping in to here, but in this game I decide to allow that to a certain degree. He castles first. Now I break the pin. At this point, once my knights are developed, I break the pin because I can't develop to e4 right away because the knight would just grab it because I would be pinned on this diagonal. So this bishop move prepares the idea of e4 kind of eventually. It's also just good to unpin pieces. And now he plays that move. He can't, I mean, he could probably play for d5, but he chooses more cagey defense. Now I play e3 because, again, it's tempting to go e4, but that would be an irresponsible move because then he could just take my knight. And when I recapture, then he would win the pawn. So I go e3. This bishop is already doing something on this diagonal, so I'm not worried about blocking his scope in that direction. And the important thing is you want your center pawns up at least 1 or 2 squares to open up your bishop's lanes. So the point of e3 is to have my light squared bishop develop in this direction so that I can castle. Because I'm not really going queenside due to my c-pawn push. Because then my king would be here and have to waste a tempo going here and then still be vulnerable to a diagonal. So this is all pretty standard just how I play. Nothing too crazy yet. But then he decides to consider fianchettoing his bishop on that diagonal toward my king position, where I'm going to end up. So here I could play the same move, and then when he comes here, I go there. And then our bishops kind of stare at each other the whole game, and that tension isn't good for me because should those bishops ever come into contact, mine is more important than his because mine would be defending my king position because once this pawn moves, these squares are weak. Like because of e3, if you also play g3 and you have a knight here, it's extremely vulnerable because only the queen defends it. And the queen wants to be able to do other things. So I decide to go for the attack of the bishop. And the bishop can't really escape. It's planning on dying here. So I'm saying I'll have that please now because I welcome this exchange. He takes because he doesn't have a retreating option because I could play b4 and this pawn covers there. So he takes. He's got most of his pawns on dark squares. So by removing his dark square bishop, theoretically he should have a good light squared bishop. So he's a high level player. And in this position, plenty of games I take with the bishop, and then this knight comes into here attacking the bishop, and the bishop doesn't have a way to get out because the knight controls both squares. And if the bishop goes this way, it's just going to get attacked. So the bishop dies in that world. So I'm like, I'm going to take with the pawn. And the idea is I just want to keep my bishop here as long as possible. So now if he moves here, my plan was to go here and sacrifice this pawn. And what's interesting is I checked after the game. I thought he should have played this, and I was going to do this and gambit this pawn. And I thought when he takes here, I'll eventually just play bishop to here, attacking and sacrificing a pawn to keep my bishop pair. But it turns out queen c2. So if knight in and bishop backs up, and then knight takes here, queen c2 actually kills the knight because the knight can no longer retreat, and my c4 pawn stops it, and the queen stops it as well. So the knight dies if in that variation. So I like taking like this. Computer prefers bishop. Anyway, so now he plays this move, and I'm like, oh, thank God, because I never would like to see this knight cop in. So, and I didn't know at the time the queen c2 worked so well. So here I played my bishop out. Now I'm saying you can't hop in here. So one bishop is helping the other bishop stay alive. I have a great center here because I have one of the benefits of taking like this is I have double pawns in the center, which are actually an asset, not really a liability, especially in the early game, in the opening. And this bishop is basically fianchettoed in the middle of the board. It has a really nice post, cutting to the enemy king. The queen can come here or here and team up with the bishop on that square, and then I can try to remove this knight and go checkmate him. So really good move here. I think inaccurate would be bishop here, just because the bishop, because of these double pawns and all these all this central control I have, the bishop is in no danger here, so you might as well bring it out and attack the king. All right, so now he develops, and now the knight is vulnerable. So if I play queen here, he can take this, and then I will have to take back. But my idea was that will open up the rook towards his king, and long term, I think my king will hide somewhere, maybe e2 or queenside, and then I'll have a good bishop pair open file to work with. So I play queen c2, basically saying go ahead and take my knight because I would like to open this file and have two bishops against none. He declines and goes here. Now his knight can move and he doesn't lose a pawn with check. Also, he gives himself a flight square for the endgame. So here, also he's stopping, knight up there. So now I realize I have another reason for queen c2 is when he made his last move, the bishop also controls e4, which means that my bishop no longer can stop the knight from coming in so easily. So now the knight is actually allowed to hop here, and then he can kind of support it even further, or, I mean, the bishop's good enough. So I played queen c2 to pile on this diagonal, but we're really fighting for the e4 square right now. And so I'm saying you can't hop in there, otherwise take, and I win a piece. So he plays kind of a waiting move. And then this is a key moment where I realize, okay, in the opening I couldn't play there because my bishop and queen were not supporting e4. But now I actually can because the knight still can't use that square. So I take the center. And now my other bishop is better. This pawn will not stay here forever. And when it moves, it will open up the attack. And I'm also blunting his bishop, hitting my knight. So that means that now I can kind of castle without worrying about, um, if in this position I just castle, then he takes, and when I take back, my king is just sitting here instead of a rook. And it's kind of a bad position. I would have to shuffle to the right and then bring the rook back. So it's kind of better to block it out first. So now he plays a natural move, knight to d7, and he's not blocking his bishop, and he's just getting his rooks connected. Doesn't really do anything though. Doesn't have any forward mobility because of my center d4, first move of the game. So now I castle, and there's no downside to this move. I have successfully played the opening where I have a nice open file on the B line with a target, an undefended bishop. If this pawn ever has to move, I have pawns I can push, and yeah, this open file is going to come in handy. That's basically, and then white has this diagonal. Those are basically white's two like things he has going for him. Also, the knight on f3 is flexible. So, and it's not doing anything like currently, so it can move. So now he plays a rook move. Um, not really making any pawn breaks yet. He needs to kind of do something, otherwise white's gonna play this move and kind of just have too much firepower. Especially if the knight gets out of the way and then I move my f pawn and then my rook is playing too, and then this rook can come behind, then it's literally a whole army against a knight and a king. It's I'm gonna win that. So first things first, I decide to cover on this file because I'm thinking, how do I improve my position here? Definitely rook here was my first thought, but I thought before I mess around with rook here, I'm just going to play rook here just because of his last move. Maybe he's thinking of some sort of pawn break where I'll need extra defense because right now this pawn is barely defended. It's attacked twice and defended twice. So I think how about I overprotect my center here? This pawn's not attacked and it's defended. This pawn's defended by a pawn and a knight. So my vulnerable point is e4. So I'm like, I'll take care of e4 first because this rook isn't currently doing anything. The knight has. Also, I didn't want to move the knight because then his knight can move and his queen would have a discovered attack. So my knight actually doesn't really have a good spot to go yet. So first I move the rook here. Then he breaks with c5, but this really weakens the b file even more. It's also not a threat. So generally speaking, if when you're playing a pawn, two squares, and it's like a break in the middle, you really want it to like carry weight. And in this case, it doesn't at all because even if it's his turn again and he takes here, I can literally take back and improve my position. And he's accomplished nothing but weakening his point that I can easily attack with an open file, semi-open file. So not a good move in my opinion, not a good strategy by him. So then I quickly put the pressure on the bishop and the pawn. And, if this knight moves and this pawn moves, I can always take here and he can't take back. So that's just kind of venom in the position using the pawn structure, right? So now he plays a queen move, connecting his rooks, okay? And his queen maybe has eyes on my king, and maybe he's doing something on the c file now. But now he's off of h4. Excuse me. So I decide to play knight h4. And I think this is a really good move because although the knight looks good here and is kind of awkward over here, my idea is if I can play knight h4 right now, there's no issue losing the knight, so he's not in any danger. He's not abandoning anything important because this pawn wants to take back here, not the knight. So all he's doing is getting in my f-pawn's way because that's one more soldier I can add to the fray. And if I can play knight here, and then let's say he makes a waiting move, and then I can play f4, and then somehow my knight comes under fire, I can always hop him back to where he was, but with the pawn ahead. If he plays g5 right away, my plan was just to hop back and claim that the g5 in front of the king is going to be a long-term weakness. I was going to try to exploit somehow. But he doesn't play g5, he plays d5. So opening up the queen on the diagonal and definitely trying to fight for the, center. He's trying to, he wants this bishop and queen to be able to have diagonal force. But this is where I realized, okay, his bishop is now just looking at a pawn. And I want it to stay that way the whole game. So this is the point of this video. What is his threat? Well, he can take either direction if it was his turn right now. And if he takes this way, then he's got two defenders, but he's won a pawn. So even if I win back the pawn, there's some exchanges and maybe my attack doesn't really come to fruition. So I don't want to allow that. I don't want to take this way because then, maybe he takes and maybe some rooks come off, or I decide, well, I have double pawns, so it's using them is smart, because if I take here, I still have the power of this. See, I still want this pawn to be able to move up to lock in. So he takes back with the pawn, because by taking with this pawn is still also attacking that. So this is like a bad pawn break from him, because he's putting his pawn somewhere where two pawns can take it. And when I take it with the double pawn, which is logical, take towards the center, right? And also, undouble my pawns. And now his knight cannot, if his knight could take or his bishop could take, it would improve his position, definitely the knight, but he can't. So he has to take with the pawn. But when he does that, now, because I took with that pawn and not this pawn, I still have this pawn, and it can play the critical move, e5, which is, in my opinion, basically ends the game on the spot, because now my bishop is guaranteed a happy life, and his is guaranteed a miserable life. Because how is he ever getting this bishop to influence the attack that I'm doing on the king side? So it also shuts down the queen and the bishop. So super critical. If I just lazily take this with the idea of, well, I want my bishop to c, that's short-sighted, because, then when he takes back, the rooks are looking at each other, and I no longer have e5. So then there's tension between these pawns, and as soon as one of those things happens, then the bishop can see, because this pawn isn't blocking. So huge deal. Like, sometimes it's like, well, how do I know what to do? Well, the general rule is take toward the center, but I really handled this well. This is like a sign of improvement in my chess. I think this is one of my best, the best I've ever been. So huge move here, e5, and now it also comes with an attack on the knight, and the knight is the best defender of the king, also defending against the check. So, I've completely won the battle. So no pieces have been won yet, but essentially I just won a bishop, because this bishop is going to have to waste so much time if it wants to be good. I mean, I guess he could go for that, but he's under attack. He doesn't have time to even think about how bad it is. It's just he has to deal with, for the next few turns, while he has bigger priorities to manage, his bishop is going to be doing nothing. But to his credit, he does actually try to use it by hopping the knight in here. And now this is another critical moment where, if I just take, because I say, I don't like your knight on my side of the board, then I've defeated the purpose. The primary agenda of my pawn chain is to lock his pawn on d5. And by taking the knight, when the d5 pawn recaptures, then his bishop can see all the way to the pawn. So, and then if his bishop is guarding the pawn, like let's say bishop takes here, right? Pawn takes. Now he has a pawn on e4 with the bishop defending, and my rook and queen cannot take the pawn without dying to the bishop. So the pawn just sits here with impunity, preventing my knight from coming back. So it's just a miserable position if I mess up and take. I don't take. I play another really strong move, in my opinion, knight f5. Now, I was thinking either knight f5, like what's his threat? Well, he can win a bishop. But this knight's pretty good, and if he takes that dark square bishop, I can recapture with the queen, and then I get out of the pin. His other capture in the position is taking here, in which case I would take back, and then he would have eyes on my queen, and I want to avoid a queen trade so I can checkmate him. You know, so I'm like, I'll play a knight move first. I forget what. Oh, my other move I was considering was what if I sacrifice here and then when he takes back, then I play because my bishop's gonna die anyway. So what if I take here, ruin his king, and then hop the knight into f5, and then the king has to try to defend that lone pawn by himself. But I just thought, no, I'm gonna play knight f5 first. Why waste a piece? You know, why sacrifice it? Why not just recapture with the queen, and then the queen can come over, here, and also get out of this, stare down. So sure enough, he takes the bishop, and part of the reason why he's giving up his good knight here for the bishop is because my bishop has sacrifice ideas with the knight, combined with the rook lifts, and the queen and the bishop it's just too many soldiers. It's gonna work at some point. So that's why he takes the bishop. But to understand that taking ruins everything and letting him take me solves all my problems, that's like what 2000 level chess, I would say, is like comes down to like the difference. So now I'm over here. I've got eyes on the king. He can never kick my knight without dropping h6. That's the beauty of a knight on f5 when he's played h6. So he takes, take back. All right, so let's look at the quality of his pieces. His rook is okay, but not really doing anything. This rook is okay, but it's attacking a pawn that's protected, not really doing anything. The knight has no mobility at all forward, and the bishop is lousy. So his pieces just aren't very good, and even his queen is shut out. So white's dominating here, but it's still, we're still playing. It's still like the early middle game or mid middle game. So it's not over yet. I'm just saying the subtle advantage is significant of this position. So now he develops his rook to defend, to stop any pawn push, and maybe he wants to double up. I don't know. There's just not any good moves really for him. So, and maybe also he's defending this from this pressure so that maybe his queen can try to trade or something. So now I play the knight into d6 with the idea of I'm getting out of my way because it was blocking my own bishop. And also, this pawn anchors in the knight, and the knight is threatening to go here if it's my turn, and it would fork the rook and the bishop, and then the rook would have to move, and then I would take the bishop potentially. But I decide, maybe I take the bishop, maybe I don't, but I'm just gonna, this is a really good knight. And it's no longer on f3 blocking my winning idea. So he decides it's intolerable and takes it. And that's basically an admission of defeat, because if you have to sack your rook for a knight just because you're uncomfortable with it and you get the knight and the pawn, sometimes you can go on to win or something, but like it's not a huge deal, but it's enough. If all else is equal and you make that decision, you're going to lose the game. Because in the end game, my rook is going to be better than his minor piece. Because the pawns don't matter as much as the difference between a rook and a minor in an endgame, as you'll see in this game. So, what else could I have done? I could have, like, this is a very slight advantage for me, like a one pawn advantage essentially. 4 points versus 5. But if instead of being hasty, I could have played Queen F4, preparing the knight to come in there. Because if I just play the queen out here, the queen is really well placed here and defends this, so that next move, knight goes there, and he can't even do the sacrifice idea without me taking back and having my pawn defended from his queen. So I would win the exchange without losing an important pawn. But I was like, I'm just gonna go for it immediately, and then he took. I'm like, okay, I'll take that. Even though I could have handled that a little better, I'll take it. So now, his queen is still defending his weakness. His knight is actually doing a nice job defending the weakness of his pawn chain. But I'm more concerned with the bishop. Um, this pawn can't advance without dying. That's why it's so vulnerable, and it has no pawns to protect it. It's a backward pawn that can't advance, so it's immobilized. And but I'm more concerned with the idea of I can take here at some point and win his bishop, and I just know that this is where this rook belongs, because this bishop is undefended. And but right now, the queen and the knight do a really good job of stopping all of that. So what's my plan? Well, I decide I'm gonna double up rooks. I'm either gonna, if I double up on the b pawn, it doesn't help because all my rooks and queen cannot overpower the knight's defense of it, because I would have to sack the exchange back, because I'm not winning this pawn without losing a rook, because my bishop is light squared, can never attack this pawn. So this pawn is safe unless, so my best strategy is to double up my rooks and get on the 7th rank, and then, try to harass them that way just to improve my position. So I played rook e2. Yeah, I forget why I didn't go rook e3. I think I wanted to go rook e5, but the knight does a good job stopping that. And I didn't want to block my queen's ability to come out. So I thought, okay, I'll play rook e2. Then his knight leaves. So yes, you're guarding your king side a little more, but you've stopped defending this. So my rook just got a lot stronger. Now the queen can't move without his entire position falling apart or losing the bishop. So now I play an interesting move. Well, I do have to acknowledge that this knight, the reason he went here is because he wants to drop it in here, bring the bishop back to life by saying, haha, you can't take my knight. Same idea as before. You can't take my knight from this juicy square without reactivating my bishop and sacrificing your own bishop. So now I play a really timely f3, basically saying, this is a bad move in most chess games because you're opening up your king diagonally. But in this position, the queen can never attack me diagonally. He doesn't have a dark square bishop, and this capture is always recaptured, and my queen defends that through a check that I control. So this center is always going to be a nice diagonal blocker, and all these squares are defended by my rook and queen. So I can play f3 with no downside. Also, I haven't played h3 earlier, which would give him a really good post with his queen, and like counter chances. But because I never did that, f3 really is a good move because in the end game I can also get my king in the middle faster. So f3 is just dominating this knight. It's basically just saying you cannot uh, try to checkmate me or try to come in here. So really timely move instead of just being laser focused on like if I don't play f3 and I just double up here, like here, oh, if I just double up here, he hops in and I have not that great of a position because my queen is attacked. And maybe I move it and then he can play this move and then I lose my bishop. So he also has this threat in the position. And so I want to be able to slide back my bishop there. So my queen doesn't want to be there. So, and the queen doesn't really want to be in front of the rook, although it could put some pressure there. But you don't want to let the whole game I've spent not allowing his knight into e3. I mean e4. I've literally spent the whole game. I'm trying to control this. His entire opening is saying I'm going to undermine your defense of e4 so you can't play it. And so white is saying I got d4 and c4. So even though I don't have e4, at least I can play e3, bishop out, queen out, and then I'll play e4 later. So why give him e4 now? Now I can finally safely take it with the pawn because my knight has done a journey and won in exchange. So just there's nothing he can do. So he just moves his king. He's strengthening this square for his rook to come here because he sees me doubling up, and the bishop prevents the king's flight square. So if he stays on g8, he actually gets checkmated very easily on e8 if the knight ever moves. So now he's saying my knight can move and my rook and king are enough to stop the double rook checkmate. So now I could play rook here or queen here to double up on the only open file in the game. I mean, basically, I have pawns everywhere, and where I don't have pawns, I have rooks. This is how you want to play. And then the queen here, I think, is a really flexible move because I'm still very quick to double up rooks here and attack the queen, bishop, and check. So I'm simultaneously doubling on two different files by the way I moved my queen back like this. So on the one hand, I'm getting out of the way of the other rook because I would prefer rook rook instead of rook queen here. And on the other hand, I'm also doing a little threat if the knight moves and if the king. I don't know. I'm just adding pressure on this line, even though right now he's doing a good job with his knight, king, queen, and rook. It's not easy for me to use the open file, but nevertheless, it's a file I control. And so now he plays this move to attack my bishop because he's running out of ideas. But I actually could drop it here, but that would get in the way of my rook idea where I know my whole strategy is blocking the bishop, stopping the knight, blocking the bishop from being able to see long range, and then stopping the cavalry from advancing, and then also doubling up on the backward pawn. So what is the bishop doing? Well, the bishop it was doing a thing, but now the king kind of moved, so it's not really doing that anymore. It's not stopping an escape as much anymore. So putting it here and trying to snipe this way, well, you're not really doing anything. So I thought I'll just be aggressive and go out here. because I don't see any problem with that. And if he tries to attack me, he's weakening around his king, and I can always hide back on h3, and I'll just move my bishop to this diagonal if I'm attacked, because the important thing is my rooks. That's what's going to win me the game, dominating the open file. So now he challenges the file because I don't have a knockout punch here. Rook takes rook, knight takes, and the queen can't take because of his king move. The king would kill the queen. So what do you do here? Well, I decide I'm just going to take his rook, because then he won't have any rooks and I will. And my one rook will dominate one of his minors. If I can exchange my minor for his, this rook will dominate this bishop. That's the whole idea. And the reason I'm able to dominate a bishop with the rook is because of the way my knight managed to hop in, because of the pawn structure allowing it to do that in an intolerable way where he had to sack and exchange. So now I just take, and then he has to take back with the knight. Not very good for him, because the king has to guard this, and the knight, obviously, it wants to be in the center of the board. It does not want to be wasting time trying to get back into the game. So what do I do now? Well, I could go up here to go for a queen trade, but before I trade the queens off, I want to maximize my pressure. So I play rook b2. Same idea as before. Maybe it comes over here, and I threaten to checkmate the knight. Or maybe I slide over here, and I team up with the bishop to defend it, and then also on these guys. This whole file, if it falls apart, the bishop, if it ever gets attacked, where's it going to go? It only has 4 squares to go. And if you imagine a rook here crashing through, because the queen is not good enough to defend against the queen and the rook. So I mean, unless he plays knight here and then knight there. That's his only defense, but my bishop actually, due to me activating it out this way, it makes it so the knight can't actually defend this. So then I'm going to win that pawn and the game. Because the bishop, when it tries to get away, it can't be defended by just the queen against my queen and rook. So it's going to have to run, but then I have a check here, and it will kill it or pin it. So he plays his knight out. I play the queen move, and now how are you defending your weakness? And chess is really that simple. It's literally just because of the way he played with his pawns in the very beginning. This move, c5, is suicide. It's long-term strategical suicide, because now you're basically saying my pawn here is going to be my long-term weakness. That's why the Sicilian defense is good, is because you play it immediately and you still have these 2 pawns that are able to kind of help each other. But in this, playing it this late, especially when I already have the open file by taking in this direction, my rook needs to do something here. Otherwise, it's not that great of a move. And the way he played made this rook have a really easy game. So he attacks my bishop, and he's saying, where are you going to go? Ideally, he would prefer if I go back this way so that he can go here and defend his weakness, and then we'll play on. And then maybe I have to sacrifice here or something. No, but I decide, no, I'm just going to hide. I'm also low on time and played this move in like less than a second, because I was thinking about all my long-term strategic ways of winning, and we're in the final phase of the game where he's about to crumble. The castle walls are about to break. So I just decide I'm going to park the bishop back here. it's not the best piece in the world, but it still maintains its pressure. And if I ever need to, I can play this move and put the bishop back, and then play that move and have a nice diagonal. If I ever have any king safety or issues where I need to use this bishop in a different way. But he immediately tries to defend his position. Another thing to point out is when he's attacking my bishop here, I played this as less than a second just because I knew I had already calculated if I put my bishop here, it doesn't matter how slow I am on taking this. It's literally it can't be defended. Literally, there's no feasible defense on this pawn other than his king marching all the way here. So I could here just take the pawn because it comes with an attack on the queen, and if he takes my bishop, I take his queen. So he would have to move the queen. But then I'm like, well, then I'm dealing with a hanging piece and a queen that's moving, and maybe it comes down and checks me or something. So let's just secure the bishop first, and then I'll take, you know? So he defends it, and I say, see you later. And that actually pulls the queen off of the defense of the pawn. Also, this pawn has been hanging for a long time, so let's see. So at this stage of the game, when he's attacking my bishop, this pawn is going to fall, and he has these outside passed pawns. I mean, this is a passed pawn, protected passed pawn. So maybe he has something if he goes for this, but let's see what he instead he chose to try to trade off rooks, which was a bad decision because I think his rook belongs here, and he should just try to win the pawn. The reason I was not caring about this pawn is because if at any point this queen takes this pawn falls, and my rook's activity comes with the hit on the unprotected bishop, and that is more than enough counterplay. So then he would just have one pawn here, and he can try to queen that if he wants, but with my rook attacking his bishop, and then these guys coming down, and not to mention my bishop in his business, it's like a fair trade. Like I'm basically sacking the pawn. I considered at some points in the game like playing a move of this pawn, but strategically this pawn just isn't really relevant because I'm not really worried. But I think that was his best counter chance. But anyway, here again I'm sacking the pawn because I'm saying if you take, I'll just take here with an attack on your bishop. Okay, now he can't even win the pawn because he's over here now. So I take this, and now where are you going with your bishop? It's attacked twice. It can only be defended once, so it can't stay here. It can't go here. It can go here, here, or here. So he plays bishop c8, which is the only move that stops a check. And here I could play rook here, pinning the bishop. And then I have a really pleasant position. I can even play, like, I can consider moves like queen here, taking advantage of the pin, if his queen isn't on that situation. That would require calculation, and I had low time. So I thought, I'm just going to move in for the kill. And now, from this position, I'm attacking his pawns. And I'm attacking his queen. So I'm basically using the B file as a springboard to have my pieces work horizontally. And now his queen, if it tries to avoid the trade, the only way for it to logically attack my king would be to check it from here or here. He's not getting through, the queen side, so he has to try to go to the king side, but he can't go here, can't go here. Maybe he goes here, but then, you still can't get in this way. Maybe here and then here. and then here or something. I'm trying to win this pawn, but like all this is at any point I can pin his bishop and double team on it. So it's tricky for him to attack. So he decides to go here with the idea of the most immediate threat of maybe I can check his king, and then if the king hides, it's checkmate. If the king moves out, I can check him perpetually. But he's walking right into queen c5, which pins his queen to his king. So now I'm basically guaranteeing a queen exchange. If he takes me here, I get a passed pawn, and a rook and a passed pawn against the bishop. I mean, I'm gonna win that. And then so the rook versus bishop becomes more and more exaggerated in the endgame. That's why I'm so happy to make this exchange at this point in the game, because I'm not doing it just for the pawn. Pawns don't matter. I'm doing it for what the pawn represented, which was blocking my rook from attacking his bishop, exposing it as an unprotected piece, and also, it was supporting. It's like the things the pawn was doing, not the pawn itself. You know what I mean? So I'm also, doing multiple things like trading is good. Like the decision to trade rooks is a no-brainer, because the more pieces that come off the board, if all these pieces come off the board, um, the rook and the bishop are going to be exaggerated in their importance, and then 5-3 is going to be bigger than 10-7. So. Okay, so I go for queen c5. Now, what does he do? He gets his bishop off the back so that it can no longer be taken, because actually my last move is attacking the bishop with check. So he doesn't want that, but now I get to check him and exchange queens. So now we have a game where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He has a bishop and I have a rook. So that's the only difference, is I have a rook and he has a bishop. The other difference is he actually has a really nice bishop, in the sense that it's defended by his king and a pawn, and it defends his weakness, which his king also defends, which defends this, and this can easily be defended. So he kind of has this perfect fortress that I can't win against. The problem is this pawn on the edge. The rook has already infiltrated on the b file, scared the bishop out of here, and now I'm going to win this pawn, and there's absolutely no defense. I mean, it's my turn right now, so I immediately attack it. And he needs to somehow play here and here at the same time, and he can't do both. So he gives up on it. Because first I take his queen, and then I attack the pawn, and I realize, there's no defending this pawn on a dark square with your bishop. So it's dead. And once that's dead, this pawn is essentially going to be a queen, unless he gives up his bishop for it. Because my rook is not going to take his eyes off this pawn. I'm not going to put the pawn here, move over here, and let him kill it. It's basically a queen princess, on her way. So I'm guarding it with the rook, and the rook is excellent at protecting passed pawns, even if it's in front of it, because I can go up here, and I'm going to literally, all my moves are just going to be pawn moves, and all of them are protected. If at any point the bishop takes it, rook takes, and then it's just going to be rook versus nothing. So here he decides to bite the bullet and take it. He should, we're low on time, so he's probably trying to flag me. He should attack my rook and try to get my rook to move. the rook is best placed on a7, but I thought with no time on the clock, I'm just going to go all the way down and push my pawn all the way to here. And once my pawn is on a7, I can move the rook and then queen. And we'll exchange on the a file at some point. He just does it right now. Tries to play on. I don't know why, other than I had like, a minute left or something. But I just very calmly, started realizing I'm gonna win my king in 3 versus his king in 3 here is a tie, but this pawn is his weakness, and his king has to defend this from my rook. And as long as that's happening, I can make some sort of as long as my king can get behind these pawns, my king can win all 3 of these pawns while he's busy defending his center. So I play rook here with the idea of now my rook is going to stay here for the rest of the game, putting pressure on here and defended by the pawn. So his king can never win my rook. My rook is impervious to the king and putting permanent pressure on here. So if at any point his king tries to play defense against my king, he will drop his center. So he attacks me, but I'm defended, so I don't need to worry about that. So h4, and then he plays a concession. So when I play h4, you can take, but then the king takes, and then your h5 pawn falls. If you don't take, I take, and then I go queen, and if your king tries to stop it, same problem. So h4 is the perfect move. And then here, I take, already by this move, there's a concession. My king can go into f4. But I say I'll take first, and then I'll play into f4. And now I'm going to attack his pawn. And he has 2 weaknesses and only one guy with a small sword. So I win all the pawns. And then I start walking up the king to cut off his king from even thinking of stopping my queen. And then I decide to just get 2 just for fun. And then I realize his king, it's not going to get stalemated because it has these squares. So I make a queen, make another one, and he resigned here. Because he realized I have a minute, and my next move is checkmate. And I could have checkmated him instead of promoting this pawn. I could have promoted this pawn, and then when he moves here, that would be mate. But I wanted 2 queens. So that's the end of the game. I'm really happy with it. I'm up to 2070 on Rapid. 14,000th. My rating, my all-time high is 2134. But I really tumbled down after I hit that. And then right now I've won 3 in a row, and I'm at 2070. I've been doing pretty good lately. So hope you enjoyed, and have a beautiful day.